Hello and welcome to episode 13 of the SD.RB podcast. Today Kevin Clark is going to be talking to us about Mocha and Stubba.
So, I'm going to be talking about testing with Mocks and Stubs today. So, the main reason for Mocks and Stubs is that some things take a long time, and when you're testing, you want them to be fast. So Mocks and Stubs sort of step in the middle and provide expected access. So Mocks and Stubs are easily confused, so we should talk about what exactly those mean. Stubs are methods that return canned data. So, for example, if I'm doing a database call and I want a certain object to be returned or something like that, then I can use a stub to send back this canned data so that I have expected values. Mocks are different. Mocks are a different type of testing where you say, I expect this method on this object to be called with these arguments. And so Mocks and Stubs work together because oftentimes you want your mock or your mocked object to return something based on the call. So I want to confirm that, for example, that the database has been hit, and then when it has been hit, I want it to return this stub data. So what I'm going to do today is write a Google spell checker in front of you that's basically just going to go to the web and send in a word and check and see if it says the "did you mean." This was one of my first toy projects in Ruby. I haven't done it in about 2 years, so I'm sort of flying by the seat of my pants, so bear with me if things get a little bit slow. So, real quick, the idea is that we're going to go to Google and, for example, let's see. Let's try and spell, let's see if Google. So, here we see the "did you mean Google?" So what we're really looking for is this string. So let's take a look at the source real quick to see where that shows up. Did you mean? So it's in here, and this is all pretty ugly. And if we actually want to send a request to the web, it's going to take a little while because we've got to make a request. But in our testing, we don't necessarily want to be forced to have net access, and we don't want to be forced to send out that request if we're trying to test often. So we're going to want to send back stub data so that this works out. So I guess the first thing we're doing is actually creating the project. So I've created a lib and test directory. These files are empty at the moment, but we're going to want to fill them in. So for Google Spell Checker, let's say the first method we want to work with is actually to check the word. So we're going to do this test first. So we create our test case. We want to require Google Spell Checker, and I did this wrong. If you've got the Ruby TextMate bundle, there's this really awesome TC snippet that, if you work with it, is really, really fast at getting this done. But if you tab at the wrong time, it gets screwed up. So what we want to do is test this check word method that we haven't actually written yet, and we're going to pass in some misspelled word and make sure that things actually work out. So first, we'll go ahead and create a Google Spell Checker object. And then we'll go ahead and pass in a bad word. So at the moment, this isn't going to do anything. In fact, this is going to fail because this require isn't actually part of the load path. So if you give me 1 second, I think it's unshift. Is it file join? Yeah. So, sorry, like I said, I'm doing this off the seat of my pants. Oh, you know what? I'll just grab it from another project. So we're just going to grab this line here, which, we'll include that in our require. So what we want to do is actually require our Google spell checker library. In this case, we're going to the lib directory and then just Google spell checker. And when we run this, we should get a failure because there's an undefined method in my TextMate bundle. So we're going to go to the command line and run our test instead. And we get our error because there is no check method on the Google spell checker. So we define our check method and take in the word and rerun our test. We get a pass because we're not actually asserting that anything should happen. But what we want to happen is it should create an HTTP request and send in the relevant data. So one thing we need to do here is figure out what the Google URL should look like when we're sending the query. So if we look at our big long query string from Google, we've got this search method, and then it specifies client and language and a bunch of stuff we really don't care about. What we can see here, though, is we've got this queue which seems to contain the word that we're searching for. So if we pull out the rest of this line here is actually the URL we should hit if we want to get this page. So we can test that again by just hitting it, and it works. So what we're going to want to do is make sure that that the HTTP library is sending a GET to that URL. So first, before we can actually set up our mock, we're going to need to require the stubbing library we're going to use. And I'm going to use Mocha and Stubba, which are put together and provide both the mocking and stubbing functionality that you're going to want when you're testing. First, we need Ruby gems, and I've already got it installed, so I can just do require Mocha, require Stubba. So I guess the first thing we want to do is make sure that the checker is sending this action. And anybody remember the HTTP library? Let's look at RI. Oh, net HTTP. Okay, that's alright, we'll go to the web. Like I said, I haven't done this in a little while. So if we go to the net HTTP docs on here we've got our simple actions. Let's see. I believe there's a simple get in here somewhere. Okay, so here's something we can just steal and use. We'll pull this out so we can examine it for the people on the podcast. So what's happening here is they require net HTTP and the URI library, then create this URI that we want to send to. We pass in the URL in post, and then get our query. So we're going to want to do something similar, but we're not going to want all of that to happen. So I guess, you know what? There's a better way to do this to make it easier. Right now, it's using that block syntax where it starts an HTTP connection and then it sends a GET. But I believe there's actually another GET version which does it in one line, which creates a connection and then just sends it. I'm sorry, it's GET response. Okay, just a second. Let's get the better documentation with the frames so that we can look at this. So we look through these, got all these others. Here we go, GET response. So here they grab the resource, they get response passing in the host name and the path, and that makes a little bit more sense for us because we're not doing a bunch of stuff on the HTTP connection. So we'll pull this out as our example code for the viewers. So what we want to see happen is this get response method on the net HTTP class. So let's just put that in directly. And with Mocha and Stubba, you can actually say, I expect it on this class or this specific object, which is really, really cool because some other libraries won't let you do that. So the syntax for setting up a mock with Mocha is just called expects, and then you describe what it's expecting. So in this case, it expects getResponse with, and then you pass in your argument. So in our case, what did we do with our Google query? In our case, it looks like this. And so we wanted to go with www.google.com and then passing in the query, which in this case is search with Google as a query, or goggle, because we're not spelling it correctly. So, actually, you know what? I'll leave that commented. Is there a question? Mocha and Stubba add methods to the generic object. Yeah. So, well, no, it's not method missing. I believe they actually define methods on object in the class, which is a little screwy. It pollutes the object space, but for the purposes of testing, we don't really care too much because we're making sure that it's doing what we expect, and those objects aren't going to exist in production. So it expects getResponse with these arguments. And we're going to leave this commented out because I'm actually going to use it later to... What's going on? Okay. Oh, I guess this is just a really, really long line, and because the font might... because the font, things are a little screwy. So we're going to leave that there and accept that everything is indented properly. So, now if we run our test, we get our failure because, well, for one, we get this uninitialized constant net because I haven't required the library that we need. So in Google Spell Checker, because we're going to need this here, we'll require it. So net HTTP. I don't believe we need URI. So if we run our test again, here we get our failure. So test check word, it expected this call getResponse with these arguments, but they didn't happen. So let's go ahead and go to our spell checker and make something happen. In this case, we want to send in this request, and that should make it pass. But nothing else is actually happening here. First, we want to make sure that we're actually sending the request. So if we rerun our test, then we're still not getting the pass because... I'm sorry? Oh, do I? Oh, cool. So, google.com, and since we've already constructed our search query, well, in this case, we don't actually want it to do Google. We want it to go with the word that we're working with. So, string interpolation and word. So now, when we pass in check and pass in goggle, this is what we expect. So if we rerun our test, it's still not quite working, and I'm not sure why. Give me just a moment. Like I said, I haven't done this particular problem in a while. So net HTTP expects getResponse, which is what we're doing. Passes in those arguments, and it just that doesn't really make a lot of sense. But yeah, then I would have gotten an error. So, you know, the joys of live coding. So HTTP expects. Okay, well, you know what? For the moment, we'll skip that part and just have it return canned data. You know what? This should already be returning canned data. If we, you know, let me just show you how to use Mocha and Stubba, since apparently this isn't going to work on me. Like I said, I decided to do this in the break, so. Yeah, when I include Google Spell Checker, it should be required. And this is coming in correctly because Google Spell Checker is being initialized properly. See, the weird thing here is I think I've done this expects before. Yeah. So let's go look at Google Spell Checker for one more second. I'm sorry? Oh. Yes. Yes. I'm sorry. It's been a very long day for me. So we called check, but we didn't set up our expectations, so it doesn't make any sense. And you know what? Let's pull this checker out into setup, just because it gets in the way of what we're actually trying to test. So we set up this checker in setup. Then we say that NetHTTP expects this response. Indentation still doesn't want to work. Yeah, my resolution's all screwed up here anyway. So NetHTTP expects get response with these arguments, and then we do checker check. And if we run it now, okay, so now we've got our pass. That's something important that I didn't think about since I'm kind of under the spotlight here. You do need to set up your expectations before you run the method. So now that's working, but now we want to have it send back some CAN data so we can actually work with it. So let's just go back to that source that I pulled from Google and rip out a bunch of it, because we don't really care about the whole document. We really only care about the part that says, did you mean? So that's right here. Let's just grab all this. Well, let's just grab, darn it. We'll grab this section. And because it's ugly, we're just going to shove this in a method down below which returns the text. We should put that in as a private method. Down here, Google response. And anybody remember the syntax for where docs or here docs rather? That's right. And then the name. And we want to be able to do indentation, so we need to do the hyphen. So response. We spit out all this crap. And response, and everything highlights okay, so we're probably good. So in this case, it expects these things, and then it should return that block, or that block of text. So I believe it's stubs. I'm sorry. Let me think. It's just returns. And then the stuff we want to return. So Google response. So let's make it so that we can actually check what's being returned. Oh, in this case, it will. I think it's res. Brian, are you looking at is it res body? Okay. So let's have it return something so we can see what's going on. And here's a response, and we'll grab it. And in this case, we want to assert that the response. In this case, we'll just assert that our stub is working. So it is the same as our Google response. So assert equal, and our expected is the Google response, and it's from response. So now when we run our test, things should pass, except there's no body in the string because the response is already there. So we don't need body because in get response it just returns the text. It doesn't return the response object. So if we run it again, now we've got passing. So now we're not hitting the web. We're returning our CAN data that we can work with. So now we've got to figure out this little regex, and that really just comes from this section. We just want to find did you mean, and then here's our link, and here's Google. So let's see. Can anybody think of a bright regex for this to happen? I guess we're looking for did you mean, and then a word between bold and italic tags, but that doesn't really work too well. Yeah, you can have several words. Oh, that's true. Okay. Oh, you're right, but I don't know if that's consistent. Here we're really trying to just grab that word, but you're right because it'll grab the first instance. We can grab the first match that's the bold italic after did you mean. So first let's write a test. We're getting our response back, but that's not really what we want to test. What we really want to test is that we get a proper word back. So we don't want to see if it's got the Google response. We want this is really the word. Check should return the proper word, or maybe nil if it's or if we spell the word correctly. So we want check to return Google, and this is going to fail because we're not doing anything yet. So it returns all this crap instead of Google. So we're going to go ahead and do our match. So it's, let's see, does it just match? Yeah. And then you pass in the regular expression, right? Did you mean? And then a bunch of stuff. Yeah. Bold, italic. And then we'll do a grouping so that we can grab the word. And italic. A question mark in front of, oh, you're right. Yeah. And then we need to end the bold tag. So, and then we want the first one, so it's the first index. So now, theoretically, this should return the proper thing. Let's do our test and see what happens. And so we expected Google, but instead we got, did you mean? Oh, zero's the whole thing, so is it 1? Okay, yay tests. So if we run our test again, cool, it's passing. So now, theoretically, if we go into IRB and require the Google spell checker, or require Google spell checker, and do Google spell checker new, and check, yeah. So if we check Google, no match for, oh, here's one error and the importance for integration tests. We assumed that it should return a string back, but you're right, it does return the response object, not the string. The only reason it was returning the string is because we stubbed it incorrectly. So make sure you're returning the proper type of object. In this case, oh, good, this lets me get a little bit more complex. What we want to do is create an object which, when you call the method body, because we're working with a response object, when you call the method body, it returns the right thing. So let's go ahead and create a stub object which does that. So I believe with Mocha and Stubba, I keep going back and forth between Mocha and Stubba and FlexMock, so my head's a little scrambled. But if we create this response, you can just call it stub, and then specify methods and what they return. So body should return Google response. And then this should return response. And this is going to fail because it's going to if we run our test. So unexpected message match. So we're calling match on that response object that we created, right? Instead of calling body on it. So what we really want is body. And we call body. And then we match against that. So now, we run our test, it passes. And we go into our lib. And now we're returning the right object, so this should all work. And require Google spell checker. And return Google. We get Google back. Cool, huh? So that's sort of a basic rundown of Mocks and Stubs. They're really, really useful when you've got something like this that takes a long time, or you don't want to be connected to the net, you don't want to work with the database. It's one of my main frustrations with Rails these days that it requires the database. It slows down your tests a lot. But we're sort of working to improve that. And Mocha and Stubba are still really useful for a lot of different things. So I'd encourage you to try it out. There's a growing community around the tools. So thanks. Questions, real quick, before you clap. Try one that's not goggle. Give me a misspelled word. We'll do Matzva and see what happens. Connection reset by peer. Sweet. So here's one of these things where, here's the thing. We didn't escape our string. So we'd want to modify that later. But if we put in a space with hex, we get the correction for bar mitzvah. Quick 10-minute demo, so it's not foolproof. But, okay, let's try California. California. So, pretty cool. What if I spell it right? I don't know. I think it'll probably return nil. Yeah, so, the importance for more tests. Right now we're just working with one. So, cool. Thanks, guys.
That concludes this episode of the SD.RB podcast. See you next time.